I'm Isaac Marshall. I work as an investment manager at TLG Capital. TLG is a private credit fund focused on Sub-Saharan Africa. And yeah, I'm really excited to have a conversation with you.
Diversified Game. Learn how to start, run, and sustain your business.
Hey, it's Kellen, and today on Diversified Game, I have Sir Isaac. Oh, yeah, Sir Isaac Marshall. And he's going to tell us how he went from Orlando, where he's from, all the way to going to Angola and other African countries as an investor. And you guys know, I'm telling you, get your plan B all the way to Z ready, because we don't know what's going to happen, especially in America with the elections. It's almost like I'm in an African country talking about watch out for the elections. Isaac, how are you doing today?
I'm good, Kellen. I'm good. No, I completely hear you, my friend. I think it's funny. My mom's from Pakistan. My dad's like blonde or blue eyes from Texas. And so I grew up with family scattered all over the world. And I think, the more I'm blown away by how similarly across the world people have lost a lot of faith in institutions and have a lot of questions about how to sort of build credibility and trust their institutions. And I think it's a problem in America. It's a problem everywhere. And I think people are working on it. And there's a lot more work to do.
Definitely. And that means we'll all have, great careers and passion projects. So, I love problems because it brings solution. Can you let the people know, how does someone from Orlando, and some people would say, why would you ever leave Orlando, all the amusement
Yeah,
parks,
yeah,
all the
yeah, I hear you.
beauty, to go to, oh, poor third world struggling Angola, Tanzania. I don't know. I'm sure you've been to Kenya by now.
Yeah,
Uhaligani
yeah,
to
yeah.
all my Kenyans out there, boy sana. But, how and why Africa?
It's a really good question. I think, you know, if you look at the firm that I work for, it's got a really interesting story because it was founded as one of the first firms that ever attracted commercial capital to invest in high impact businesses in Africa, right? And so when you think about it, a lot of the folks that are investing in Africa, people often think about business in Africa as philanthropy, to be totally honest, right? This is how oftentimes people think about it. But the reality is that there are a lot of great, frankly, incredible entrepreneurs. Because if you can build a business in Lagos or in Tanzania or in Ghana, in the backdrop of all of the macro shocks that have happened, then you're one of the best entrepreneurs on the earth, to be honest. And I think that the most entrepreneurial minds, I think the biggest, frankly, people who are willing to put in the hustle on the planet today are on the African continent. And the thing that was inspiring to me was, I think I mentioned, my mom coming from Pakistan. I think that there are parts of the world that when you're living in the US, you don't really learn much about. Like I remember when I was a kid, when you had to memorize the countries and capitals of the world, the African continent was extra credit, right? It was not required, which is crazy. That's Florida school curriculum, right? And I think it's a big mistake because actually African people and African countries over the next couple decades will actually be some of the most important places that define the destiny of the world. I think a lot more growth will happen. But I think to me, I was just enchanted by the opportunity and by the vibrancy of these countries.
Okay. Well, tell the people, because there's someone listening right now. I can feel the audience and like, Kellen, get to the point. I want to be Isaac. How do I get in a position, get hired? Do I have to create a
Yeah.
company? And when I look at Isaac's LinkedIn, his resume says everything from Goldman Sachs all the way to NYU Business School. And maybe
Mm.
my path wasn't that.
Mm.
How much of a measure did a Goldman Sachs going to NYU, having certain networks, get you to where you are now?
That's a really good question. So, Colin, I think that the nature of the world has changed a lot, where now more and more young people, especially in the States, I mean, one thing, I've been on 65 flights in the past 12 months. So I've been in more than 30 cities. And it's really interesting because one of the things you see is that everywhere in the world, it's very rare to find the entrepreneurial spirit that exists on the African continent, but also in the United States. And I think what's cool about entrepreneurship is it doesn't take a university background. It doesn't matter where you work. What matters is, are you creating things that are valuable to people? Are you actually being of service to people around you, right? And I think if you want to do stuff in Africa, look, I think having training in investment banking helps for the specific thing I do, right? Because our main focus is how do we execute complex transactions where local institutions may struggle with the regulatory frameworks, may struggle with a lot of elements to sort of execute. And that's kind of my specific niche. But there's so much opportunity. There's opportunity in agriculture. There's opportunity in tourism. There's opportunity in education. And it's just people have to go out and build it.
Well, when doing business, in Angola or even going to Tanzania, where in Angola, Portuguese is necesito. In Tanzania, you have to get your Swahili on, your pure Swahili. As an investor, it's one thing to find deals, but the communication. Are you some polyglot that, you can do every just language out there? Or do you hire translators? Because a lot of people say, I want to go to these countries. I just don't know the language. I don't know the culture. How do you adapt?
It's a good question. I think, prior to this, the beginning of our interview, you were sort of chatting with me a little bit about your origin stories. And I think one thing you've been good at doing, even with this podcast series, is building trust. Right? You've been able to build meaningful relationships in short periods of time by asking questions that are relevant to people's lives. And I think, obviously, having language is relevant. I think most African countries speak English, frankly. I think today, especially like young people, for the most part, speak English. But I think one of the most important things is actually just building trust with a person and demonstrating that you have their best interests in mind, demonstrating that you want to be a partner with someone for the long term and not for the short term. Because look, if you're dealing in the geographies that we deal in, everything takes 10 times longer than people think it's going to take, because it's difficult, right? I mean, if you look at the last couple of years, most African countries have had at least a 30% currency depreciation. Any Nigerians on the call will know that the currency is down 80% over the past year. Several countries went through sovereign default, and when the sovereign of a nation fails to pay its debts, then it makes it very difficult for anyone else to pay their debts in the whole country. And I think when you're dealing with that level of challenge, it builds an extraordinary resilience in the entrepreneurs. And I think what you see is actually, while not really recognized, there are amazing businesses in these places. And in the past couple months, we financed the biggest filmmaker in Nollywood history in Nigeria, and he's got a contract with Amazon and Netflix, and again, just went out and started shooting movies. We financed the largest aluminum recycling plant in West Africa. We financed the first ever entrepreneur who built a fair trade apparel manufacturer on the African continent and exports to Target. It's the first time an African-made clothing brand is exporting to Target, and it's swimwear. One of the co-founders is former Miss Africa. So these are really, really cool. They're cool deals. They're exciting deals, and they're great entrepreneurs. And I think that there's opportunities to build things, and I think there's opportunities to fund things on the continent.
I am going to let a warning be known because of the type of listeners. Majority of people are listeners. Hopefully they go over to the YouTube, make it go viral like Cat Williams did with Shay Shay. But you went everything from manufacturing to clothing to movies. I'm going to have somebody say, Kellen, I need to know Isaac. And that's why links will be in the description, because you guys can contact him. And I'm sure there's a portal or some way for you to tell him all your great ideas. Entertainment and clothing, some of the most risky things outside of restaurants to invest
Mm,
in. How do
yeah.
you vet those things? How do they find you, or do you find them?
It's a great question. And this is, I think, one of the biggest challenges I have is I probably get at least 100 messages a week with people wanting me just on LinkedIn, right? With people with ideas for various things. And I think, and then in your email, you get another couple hundred a week. So it's like, for me, the key thing that I'm always looking for is people who de-risk the heck out of their idea. So in the case of the clothing brand, the entrepreneur went through very lengthy means. He won a contract with Target, right? He won multiple layers of sort of downside protection that are kind of built into the deal, right? So he thought really meticulously that if someone was going to take risk on this, and it wouldn't be someone taking risk, in an outsized way. It would be someone who was as careful investing their money as it would be if they're investing like their grandmother's money, right? And that's how we think about fund management, right? So my job is, to your point, it's of course to back the cool entrepreneurs, but it's also making sure that we can protect our investors' capital. Because if an investor has trusted us to invest money in geographies that people don't often put capital to work, then we want to behave in a way that's really, we want to be very, very careful with those funds, because we're trying to demonstrate to the global investment community that you can make reliable returns investing in great African businesses. And we've done that. We've demonstrated that across 42 deals over the past 15 years. And we've actually never lost money on an individual investment in our history, right? And doing that across 20 African countries. So but to do that, you have to be really, really careful. And I think that for every one idea we take forward, obviously there's hundreds that we didn't take forward, but there's also probably a dozen or 2 dozen, maybe more, maybe 50 or 100, I don't know. But there are a bunch of ideas that we couldn't back because the entrepreneur hadn't done the de-risking. They hadn't thought through, how do I reduce the risk that the investor is taking? And I think for anybody building a business in Africa, the most important thing is, how do you reduce the risk for folks to come in? Because, I think that's one of the key things. And maybe not just in Africa, I think frankly anywhere.
Now, someone's saying, okay, for clothing, maybe they had a lot of machinery. Let's say you have $100,000 worth of machinery and you need 50,000. But for movies, it's different, because you could have a
Yeah.
great movie, but if Netflix, who doesn't always give the best deals, especially the Africans, I mean, they are getting,
Yeah.
I'll tame my tongue on that when Netflix will talk privately again and again and again. But in YouTube follows the same thing, not paying Africans the same for, as they would as an American or someone in Europe, and they blame it on advertisers until you can show proof, like we have, saying, look, we have this client in Kenya, this one in Texas. They have the same crossover appeal. So why are they not getting similar monies? Why is it so far off? How does someone de-risk the movie? Does it need to be already done and have a big following, but not be published on the Amazons or the Vimeos, as we see so many African creators do, and then they want money for something they've already published? Like, how do they de-risk? How did that person that you mentioned, how did they de-risk?
It's a really good question. I mean, in that instance, look, we backed somebody who already had a contract with Amazon, right? So it's like, once you're there, that's a lot of de-risking that's taken place, right? This is a person who's made exceptional movies. I mean, The Wedding Party is the highest watched film in Nigerian history, right? It's like the most popular Nollywood movie there is. What's amazing to me is the fact that there weren't way more investors looking at financing these deals. To be honest, I think that's the opportunity set, for folks who are entering the market or thinking about, if you're in university or something and you want to go into finance. I think there's a huge opportunity set to dedicate your career to helping African entrepreneurs, because I think that there's a lot of businesses that are actually great businesses that people, that just don't get the capital that you would think that someone like that would pull. But I think we back to a well-established and a great business. I think if you're early on, I think now you really have to think to yourself, what is the value that my movies are making, and how do I set up distribution out the gate? So for example, if I'm making films, the most important thing, of course, I need to make sure I have good content. But beyond just good content, I need to make sure that I have good distribution. I need to think about how am I making sure that people are actually watching the content that I am putting out. And, I don't know, it could be film festivals, it could be digital marketing, it could be designing it around themes that are relevant to people's lives, around messages that are relevant to people, right? But I think, and of course, doing it with quality is super duper important. But I think with things like clothes and movies and those sorts of industries, I think that you ultimately have to figure out a way to get some backing behind it, right? There has to be either, a sizable following on YouTube or socials so that you can, then take it to someone like Netflix or Amazon and make the pitch for why they should, because there's just so much content out there today, but there's also such a demand for content. So I think movies is tough. I mean, to be honest, the entrepreneur we backed, he had other work aside from just movies in the beginning, right? He wasn't somebody who just began out the gate, sort of going straight into film, because it's not easy to do that. And especially if you got to provide for a family, you got to make a life for yourself. Yeah, you got to set plans, I think.
Yes, and I agree. The Wedding Party was a great movie. It's a classic. And I think, movies like that, I'm an old school Nigerian. I'm the biggest collector in America that doesn't sell movies. I have VCDs that people say, how did you get that? And I've been collecting them over 20 years. Wedding Party was good. I'm biased because some of my favorite movies are on VCD and people would say, oh, the quality, but the actors are still alive, some of them. But even a movie that needs a part two, and maybe this sparks something for you to reach out, but it was on Netflix or Amazon Prime. I think it was Netflix. Namaste Wahala, where we mixed Bollywood and Nollywood together. The two biggest movie they do more movies in America, right?
Yeah.
That movie showing the comparisons of cultures that were more alike. All mother-in-laws are going to be a certain type and fathers are going to be a type if they're aligned. That needs a part 2, 3, and 4. And yes, I am for hire to help. But that was beautiful. The same way that Nollywood or African music is going to merge with K-pop, hopefully sooner than later, and it won't just be AI. But these things need to merge because outside of America, the music scene is just dope and it's pure still. I think it's not someone saying I need a Rolls Royce today, unless you're DeVito, but he grew up with a Rolls Royce. It's okay. He grew up with private planes. His dad worked hard for it. Don't hate on him. But when you are going into the other type of investments, construction, would you advise that they have the equipment already, or what are some things that they can do? Because they could have the contracts. Yeah.
I think the contracts are most important. I mean, to be honest, most manufacturers we partner with go very asset light. I mean, in the world today, you can just contract manufacturing. You don't need the equipment. I mean, like the manufacturing company we work with, they don't own their own manufacturing plant. They contract it, right? Because if you take the risk on investing upfront, I mean, this is the biggest thing is people think that you have to put so much money down to begin with. Your priority is getting the revenue. You want to get the revenue before you have any money down, right? Because every dollar you have to put into the business before you can start earning revenue, that's risk, right? So you want to figure out how to be as asset light as possible. And in the world today, you can build websites, you can build manufacturing, you can build anything, all using other services that different people have providing, and you can start getting revenue without actually having to do anything other than the designing, the marketing. I mean, to me, like one of the key skill sets today is how do you actually tell a story? How do you make sure the product is of a high quality? And then how do you make sure that it sees people? I think those are the three most important things. And then I think obviously, I mean, it's different if you're trying to raise money from an investment firm like we are. I think that we would be farther down the line than, like, we wouldn't do typically seed stage stuff, right? Like we're not backing typically in the very beginning. We're backing when people are trying to take what they're doing to the next level. And
Mhm.
I think, but the most important thing before you can get to the 1 to 10 stage is the 0 to 1 stage. And that, you just have to, you gotta hustle until you make things work and can begin bringing in revenue. And it's not easy. I think it's really, really hard to do. And I think it takes a variety of different skill. I think different skill sets can be good at it. I don't think it's just one type of person that can be good at it. There's one other thing I want to touch on in this. I think investment firms like ours, we're not the most important players, obviously, right, in the African continent, right? The ultimately African countries, African entrepreneurs are going to define their own destiny, and they're going to be sort of the real heroes of the story, right? I think for us, our goal is how can we help people who many people would be shocked that they don't get financing. How do we help them to sort of scale and grow to the next level? And I think there are people that you need to play the heroes. There are people who you need to go out, take the risk, and start businesses. And that I think is the most heroic thing. It's the hardest thing you can do. It's harder than my job, I can guarantee you. Then there's also people who need to play supporting roles, who, rather than focusing on doing, banking or finance in the US or, in a place where things I think are more established, focus on the countries that many people come from, right? You meet people from many different countries and then they end up, just focusing on the geography that they're now living in. And I think there's a big opportunity to build an ecosystem as well to support.
Definitely. There's a lot of room, a lot of growth. They say youngest population on the
Mm.
earth, Africa, a lot of brilliant people doing brilliant things out of very little.
Yeah.
And it's very rich. And the gap, but how do you as an investor vet? Because I don't know if you've ever seen in Kim Awa's movie called The Master, but The
Mm.
Master, he put together a council of people, even had the police giving an escort. So when they picked up the foreigner, it was a whole big show. How do you vet to
Mm.
know that this is real? Because it's not just a Nigerian thing, an African thing. Globally,
Yeah, of
people can
course.
do a lot to make it seem
Yeah.
they are bigger than they are. So how do you go about that?
It's a great question. And I think especially now, one of the things I was just having this chat with my mom and dad recently. It's like, hey guys, if you ever get a call from somebody on the phone that sounds like me and they're like crying and asking for money, make sure we set up like a passcode so that it's actually me. Because, recently there was a company that was frauded out of a number of million of dollars because somebody used AI to impersonate the CFO of the company and make a wire instruction. Right. And that's pretty crazy, right? But that's the world we're in, where you can call, you can imitate a voice perfectly, you can imitate a face perfectly. And I'm really curious. I think that's a big problem that people have to figure out, is how do you actually verify the authenticity of information nowadays, right? I think it's a very big problem. And and I think people will come up with solutions, but I think for us, one of the key things we look for in vetting, obviously we're always meeting entrepreneurs in person. I think in Africa, business is quite relationship driven, right? I think that people want to meet you face to face. I don't think many of the companies we deal with would deal with us if we never, went down and actually met people on the continent. I think this is not a job that you can kind of just sit in your office and you can take calls up until a point, but I think ultimately face to face is irreplaceable. And I also think that we care a lot about reference checks. I mean, we spend a lot of money doing very thorough background checks. We hire investigation firms to do human source interviews on every person we deal with. They look into the whole background of every business dealing that person's ever had with a variety of different people, and they ask people like, what happened? And I think that the integrity check is probably the most important part of the due diligence process, because it's one thing for the numbers to make sense, but you just want to make sure like I'm very humble about this. Like if someone wants to cheat you, they'll cheat you. And people are much smarter than I am, you know. There are very, very clever and creative ways that people can. And that doesn't apply just to Africa, that applies everywhere, right? I always say the only country I've ever been robbed in, and I've been to countries that, you know, they say that you shouldn't, you go to their various warnings on the USA travel website and all that stuff. But like the only country I've ever been robbed in was in central London. So, you know, I've literally, I've never had any safety problem anywhere. Even they say it's South Africa at night. I've never had a problem, you know, anywhere. Places that people say are dangerous. I think, you know, if you ask Europeans what they think of America, they'll say gun violence, you know, and of course it's not that there's not a problem with gun violence in America, but like, you know, it's like, if you're walking around New York, you know, you're not like in imminent danger on a constant basis, right? And I think it's the same in all these countries, right? Actually, they're profoundly safe. I think Kampala is one of my favorite cities on earth in Uganda, right? It's a beautiful city. Dar es Salaam is probably one of the safest cities I've been to in my life in Tanzania, right? Nairobi, extremely safe city. And even with the protests that are happening, I think they're being narrated as if it's a violent thing against the government. I think it's really it's the youth finally standing up and saying, "Hey, we've had enough corruption."
Like
And
the youth need to do here in America. You know,
yeah,
it's their time. It's their time. I'm old. I'm 40 plus. My time, 9 p.m. I'm in the house. And you know, I don't know if you've been to Rwanda yet, but Rwanda is one of the cleanest and the
yeah, it's
safest
amazing.
at any
Very
time
safe.
of day, night, people cleaning the streets. You're like,
Yeah,
why don't we have this, you know, everywhere? Um, I'm gonna go back to how you got your position because I can hear again the audience sometimes say, "Okay, we heard the great NYU, we heard
mm,
you know that. Did you find this job or did it find you? Was it your network that someone said you need to work here, or was
mm.
it something that you applied for and you went through many of interviews?"
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I look, most of the jobs, like I had like 30 plus interviews for my first job, right? At the first bank I worked at, right? And then from there, I think I ended up finding TLG because actually I was interviewing with a couple different fintech companies. So I was interviewing with different financial technology companies. I wanted to do something focused on, I guess, like something in finance, but focused on markets where financial services have not been built out to the degree that they maybe should be. So I think, you know, I was interested in doing something focused on Latin America, Africa, Asia. I think I always had a special place in my heart for Africa, frankly, because there's such a vibrancy to the countries. I think, you know, obviously Africa has many different countries, but there's one common feature across the continent, and that's that the community is put above the individual. People really do think about themselves fundamentally as community first. So I kind of found this job. It initially came in as like a trial period. You know, it was just like a 3 month test. Basically, everyone always starts that way at most of these jobs, right? And you just have to prove yourself. And I think the most important thing is always thinking about any. You know, I got advice a long time ago when my mentors told me that, you know, when you're doing a project, you want to make sure that you deliver on what's needed, but then you think, okay, how can I add more value to this than was asked? You know, and always thinking about how do you make it just a little bit better. And I think part of it is also just being really honest about what you're good at and where your strengths lie. I think for me, both my parents are child psychiatrists, and so I've always just been fascinated with people, because I'm kind of, you know, born of two parents that are totally different cultures, and I think they share a common faith, the Baha'i religion, which is sort of kind of what brought. I think it made it easier for them to have a common core. But it's, I think, seeing the union of different cultures is always really really hard and to do in practice, right? And I think what they've done is extraordinary, and so I think I've been interested from a young age in learning about different cultures and bridging gaps and divides and communication barriers between people from different backgrounds. And so I think that that's naturally kind of guided my career. But I think young people just have to think to themselves, like, how do I choose something that I'm going to be able to pour time into? And how do I choose something that's going to be of help to people? It's going to be of service to people, because that's how you build a business, you make money, is actually if you're doing something that's actually helpful to people and is solving a real pressing problem they have.
I love it. And that the Baha'i religion, that's connected to Hinduism, correct? Is
So actually, the Baha'i religion, we believe that all faiths are the same God. So
Mhm.
Buddha, Krishna, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, we believe they're all messengers of the same divine. And that, long story short, we believe that the purpose of religion should be to create unity.
Mhm.
And that today it's more important, rather than figuring out what religion you affiliate with, it's more important to actually focus on those points of unity and harmonizing different perspectives. That's kind of the
Hello, everyone. Join us on an exciting journey with Explore the World Cameroon. London and Sydney go take you explore Cameroon, the heart of Africa. Experience the vibrant culture, nature, and traditions from Yaoundé Market to rainforest adventures. Every page na new discovery. Join the Cameroonian food, music, and wildlife with our explorers. This book na true celebration of Cameroon spirit. Get your copy now. Available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and through your library and bookstores via Ingram's Park. Don't miss this adventure.
And I say that because, again, I tell people business is like dating and how you do life. And so when you date somebody and you guys think totally different on how to raise kids or this and that, the fact that that's their, it always comes back to they have something that they can focus on instead of being at odds. It's sometimes funny when Republicans and Democrats or independents all get together. And it's like, hold on, you're on the opposite side. So I guess you like to argue. I don't like to argue. And you don't have to agree with me. I can respect your view, but I don't like to argue. So I just want to connect that for the audience, because you guys are sometimes doing business with people that you don't understand and they don't understand you. But, all religions are supposed to, like you said, it's all about a oneness and coming together. But we somehow man finds a way to break
Amen.
things.
And I think, one of the teachings of my faith, which I think is something that drives my life, and I think it's really important, regardless of what one's moral structure is, I think it's important to have a faith of some kind that sort of helps guide you, especially through the difficulties, because life throws like horrible things at you. Right. And all of us go through that. I think one of the driving things is this belief that the destiny of humanity is world peace. And it's just a question of how we work towards that. And I think, it doesn't have to be such a grand thing. Actually, I think, to be honest, the most important work one can do is not even, financing companies in distant places or anything like that. It's actually just like, how do you interact with your neighbors? Like, are you invested in the lives of the kids who live down the block from you? And are you contributing to their upbringing? Are you contributing to them having a great life, feeling supported? Because it takes, the next generation and the generation after that, these are going to be the real change makers that drive progress. To your point, because you and I were in bed at 9 p.m. And, I think that people have to focus on the really small things, right? Like, it's not complicated. I got a buddy who has been sitting with these two of the kids live down the block from us, and just once a week he sits with them and does homework with them, and their grades have gone up like 4 letter grades, just because once a week he devotes like 3-4 hours to sit with them. And look, it's tough, like getting them to sit down and do homework. It's like, it's hard, but it's also built confidence in these kids where, for the first time, they now know that they can do it. They can get the grades. And I think if we all spent just a little bit of time supporting one another and actually learning from some of the cultures that are very, very common on the African continent, where the community is always put above the whole. The idea in the West, what happens where you don't know your neighbors is crazy. It's totally insane. The idea that you would live in an apartment building and not know who you live next to is an insane concept.
I live in Palm Beach County. I've met one of my neighbors officially because we live in the more rural area. So everyone has a good amount of land and you can hear them shooting and everything, right? But that's why you don't always know your neighbors, here. And I remember living more in the city type thing. And it's like, I need to know everybody. And to some people, that's weird. Some people, they get uncomfortable, but I just want to know, what your crazy is and make sure that everything is good. And it's also helpful if you ever need any help, we're here. And that's what you get in Africa. That's what I think you get around most of the world when you get outside of America and some of the Western. In London, with our accents, everybody, I mean, I've had women follow me in the bathroom. It's been crazy. The attention, like an American. And you're like, yeah, can I use the bathroom? And so it's crazy. Talk about what you think about cryptocurrency when doing these deals. Has it helped? Because much of Africa will allow you to have an ATM machine and nobody cares, as well as crypto and AI go hand in hand. Give us your opinion on that.
Yeah, I think, okay, so for me, I'm all about, does a particular technology solve a problem? Right. So for me, like one of the applications of crypto that I think is really, really interesting, and it's more cryptography than cryptocurrency, but it's like, how do you make sure that a piece of video that someone puts on the internet and says is legitimate, how can you cryptographically verify that it was taken in a camera and actually matches, and you can sync it back to basically authenticate that content is real? Right. That's an example of using cryptographic tokens in a way that solves real human problems. Right. I think that a lot of what cryptocurrency has tried to do is frankly the same stuff that humans have been doing for hundreds, if not thousands of years, which is just gambling. I think a lot of crypto is basically different ways of facilitating people getting excited about stuff and pouring their money in. That being said, I think that there are use cases for cryptocurrency that are really profound. And I think Africa is a great example of that. I think there are many African countries where, as an alternative to the currency of their country, people want some kind of stable store of value. And I think, Bitcoin and Ethereum, there's some use cases for that. And I think there are people who are a whole lot smarter than I am who think that these currencies are the future. But I think one of the things that I'm always curious about is to what degree is a particular currency solving a particular problem, right? So if you're using a cryptocurrency, is it because you don't trust your government to put in appropriate policies to make sure your currency is stable? Is it doing something else? And I think we typically don't have that many cases when people deal with crypto. I mean, to be honest, most people prefer to deal in dollars rather than crypto if they want stable currency. I think that what I'm most interested in is people want to get involved in the crypto space because I think there's a lot of opportunity. It's just, how do you take that technology and solve problems with it? How do you make payments easier? How do you make it easier to track information? How do you cryptographically verify that a piece of information is real? Those are problems that people can learn. And there's all kinds of courses on the internet that are available where you can learn data science, you can learn the science behind cryptography. And again, I think it'd be really cool if we helped our kids down the block, just once a week, just did some coding class with them, right? Just to build the education about some of the technologies that are going to come in the future. And, I think there's a lot of amazing applications that'll come of it.
Okay. Well, I agree. And, when you talk about, I was watching an interview with the Nomad Capitalist did on Vincent Kate, and he is a cryptographer who said, I renounced my citizenship here in America because wherever as a cryptographer I go, America is going to own a piece of me and I don't want to be owned. And I'm old school crypto where we don't talk much about crypto as an investment, because I remember when you could mine it at your university and they didn't know why their bill was going up or what was going down. And everyone thought you were a criminal. They would call you, right? If they knew what you were doing. So, it serves a purpose when you're a broke college student and East Bay won't take your money because you don't have any, but you can go.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. So
No,
I
I'm all about
do
it.
it.
Look, if you're
Yeah.
making some money with it, I mean, no, don't get me wrong. I'm not knocking it at all. I mean,
Yeah.
that's really cool.
Well, I'm knocking it. I'm knocking it as an investment that's going to make you uber wealthy. I tell people, you guys don't understand
Yeah.
what this is. It's
You know,
necesito.
yeah. I mean, I have a Congolese friend who is runs ultra marathons. You know, he's a super fit kind of guy. And he said to me once, I don't trust anything that's easy. And I think that's the big thing to remember is anything that seems like a get rich quick scheme is probably going to get you in trouble or going to make you lose money.
Well, as investor, are you looking at, typical venture capitalists, sometimes called vultures? I'm in a group called Florida Funders, and people, I tell them, hey, they don't want to give you 1 million. They want to give you 10. That's what we're doing here. And I'm a small member. I'm just a grain of sand. I have no real pull except to tell you, if you have a tech idea, but typically VC are looking for, we'll bet on 20 to hit on one, maybe two. But are you looking for that? But you had mentioned earlier, you guys
We're quite
haven't
different.
lost money. You're very different.
Yeah, we're very different. I mean, we're basically looking to we mostly are doing lending actually. So we're basically aiming to do lending that local banks might struggle to do, and we'll typically partner closely with local banks. So we basically try to be an extension to local banks in Africa to help them take on complex transactions that might be just too time intensive and might have particular nuances that make it difficult for the bank to do it on its own. And that's where we'll kind of come in. So, cross-border film financing in Nigeria was the first ever deal of its kind with that, or anyone ever done that, or working with stressed loan portfolios, things that are a bit more nuanced than anything a bank's typical remit. That's where we kind of focus. So it's a little bit different than venture. It's like it would be almost like if like a aluminum recycler or industrial helicopter business, that kind of thing, like very very real economy, machinery type stuff is where we're focused.
And I want to be respectful of time. So I'm going to merge some things together because I really think Isaac, and maybe he'll introduce this to TLG, should have a podcast, a YouTube of their own, of their success stories, because it's inspiring. And I know I'd love to talk to everybody you guys deal with because we love to tell stories, but even for, that platform or even your own. But my question being, one, I'm going to ask you what your community give back is, and you can answer, which one you like first. Your community give back that you're doing or the one you like to do in the future, but also how do you avoid the kickbacks? Because kickbacks, even in America, I have a reputation. My client said, what was that money that you sent us? Oh, they gave me a kickback for that deal. We don't take kickbacks because then I can't dedicate myself to your best interest. I might be thinking about what that kickback is going to be in the new boat that it could buy me or the Prevost the RV. So how do you avoid and deal with that as a regular human being that hasn't fully got sainthood yet, as well as, your community give back?
It's a good question. I mean, on the kickbacks, I'll be honest, we just lose deals. Like there are deals that we just lose and we don't do. I think if there's any element of bribery, especially of government officials, stuff like that, we're out. We're not even going to touch it. Goes in a database, gets reported up to some of our investors kind of track this kind of thing. Especially, like World Bank is an investor in our fund. So it's really, really important or I should say will be an investor in our fund by the end of this year. So I think it's super duper important that we never take anything like that. And also just on a matter of ethics personally, it's like one of the big problems is there's a fascinating professor called Leonce Ndukumanu, the professor at UMass Amherst. He's a guy from Burundi, and he did a really interesting analysis of the capital flight In other words, capital that has left the African continent via undocumented and illicit means, basically. And you basically find that something like near 2/3 of Africa's GDP as a continent has left by people basically sapping it on the sides. And that's horrible. Like, that's crazy, right? Far more than all of the aid money that's gone in has just been sucked out by people smuggling minerals, taking bribes, putting money into UK real estate, all kinds of things. And so that's, illegally putting money into UK real estate and misappropriation of funds, all that stuff. So that's a really big, important problem to solve. And I think I want to end on the community community givebacks, because that's, I think, to me, one of the most important parts of what we do. And I'll kind of tell the story of a guy called Emmanuel Katongole, who won EY Entrepreneur of the Year, because in 2009, he built the largest and first World Health Organization qualified manufacturer of HIV and malaria drugs on the African continent. And what's really exciting is that today, he's chairman of our advisory board. And that was actually the first deal that TLG ever did, was financing that manufacturing plant. And if you look at that plant today, the death rate from HIV and malaria together in Uganda has gone down from 550 to less than 200 per day in terms of deaths. And if you think about before how extreme it was basically as if you had every single day a 747 kind of crashing full of people, except almost half of them would be under the age of 10. And that was sort of the situation with HIV and malaria. And the worst part is that these are completely treatable diseases. And so Emmanuel had lost two of his sisters to HIV and malaria, respectively. And so I think he's an incredible entrepreneur where, in the last couple of years, we've treated more than 1 million people with HIV, several million people with malaria. And the business has also done pretty well on the back of that. But the biggest thing is that it's solving a real problem. And Emmanuel's story is amazing because the guy grew up with no shoes. He grew up, without anything, and basically had a passion for trying to figure out this problem. He began by playing a very small role. He was importing HIV and malaria medications from India, made some money doing that, and then eventually saved up enough where he could put some money down. We invested some money, and they built the first manufacturing plant on the continent, and it deploys 550 Ugandans in one of the most state-of-the-art factories in all of Africa. We won Deal of the Decade for that transaction. And I think, that is the kind of work that we really want to do. And that's I think why we do what we do.
I love it. I love it. Please tell the bosses, these are the stories I want to hear, I want to watch, I want to read the books on, because this is how, we just elevate and go up. Let the people know. And shout out to, you said Amherst, my wife and I, we were married in the 413 Western Mass. So Pittsfield, Northampton, but Springfield and Amherst, I love y'all and you know it. But let the people know where they can connect with you. What is the protocol of, sending that email? Is there a form to fill out? Should they send you, a profit and loss sheet? Yeah.
Just hit me up on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's fine. Yeah. I think that's where most people do, and then I'll eventually get to it. If I don't reply immediately, give me some patience. But I try to check it at least every week.
Got you. Well, you guys can go to LinkedIn. It's just that simple. Again, I could go Joe Rogan style on this, but I think I'd want to do it in person, and I'd either want to be in London, where Isaac is, or in Africa, so we could really enjoy the ambiance.
Yeah, come through.
Yeah, I'm going to talk to you off air about it.
Let's go to Cameroon. Yeah. You're based there, right? You got some stuff there. So
I have some stuff in Cameroon, and we're gonna talk. The audience knows some of what I do. They know we travel a lot because they look at the Instagrams and all that stuff that the social media manager helps with. Yeah. But I just, this could go on and on because I love this. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, and the best is yet to come. So you guys have made it to the end. I thank you for that. Make sure that you comment. Make sure that you like. No matter how you experience the podcast, make sure you share this with someone. It will change their life. You guys be blessed.
Are you tired of the rat race in America? Are you ready to visit the motherland to relax and rejuvenate? Are you ready to explore all that Africa has to offer? Then check out the brand new Diversified Game Academy course, Prepare for My First Trip to Africa. Are you worried about being able to afford the trip? We got you. We will show you how to travel either on a budget or as a baller. Learn how to stress the value of the USD. Did you know that 100 United States dollars is worth over 1,000 South African rand, or 10,000 Kenyan shillings, or 54,250 West African CFA? Are you worried about taking your kids? Get the game from Kellen Cash, a bona fide world traveler, having traveled to almost 20 countries, several of those in Africa. Get the game on taking your kids on their first trips. Learn how to find the best tickets, get the visas, and plan your own adventures in Africa. Don't let Eddie Murphy have all the fun. Plan your own coming to Africa trip starring you, produced by you, and featuring you. If you are ready for a life-changing experience, sign up for our course today, Diversified Game Academy. Get prepared and purchase at diversifiedgame.com.
Hey, what's going on, fam? This is Jay Cameron inviting you to join us in Ethiopia next March 2025. And this is going to be an iconic trip that you don't want to miss, a trip of a lifetime. We're going to be visiting Addis Ababa, Gondor, Lalibela. You'll have a chance to taste the amazing Ethiopian food. You'll also have a chance to visit the Rastafarian community. You'll get the history, you'll get the fashion, you'll have an opportunity to shop. It's going to be a trip, an experience of a lifetime. So make sure you sign up to join us in Ethiopia, March 2025.